Ladies and gentlemen, I want to explore the private provision of children's services, and according to the Revolution Consulting submission, more than £1.5 billion is spent every year on outsourced foster care and children's homes by local authorities in England. But I was most shocked when I read the Foster Care in England review, and just to quote them, historically, as independent foster agencies have been bought and sometimes after a relatively short period again sold once again, investor returns realised upon the sale of the businesses have been very high. In fact, significantly ahead of returns from both the mainstream stock markets and private equity fund returns during the same period. Now, Professor Jones, in your own submission, you wrote hundreds of millions of pounds are now being taken out of children's care services as profits by private companies and distant venture capitalists. Don't you think that rather than that money leaking out of children's services, that should instead being spent on assisting children's services? Professor Devine?
Yes, I completely agree. I think there's two issues there. One is about the layer of profit that is obviously going into private providers' pockets rather than benefiting the children for whom the services are provided. And the second issue is the quality. And I would simply add to the debate that if you're a head of commissioning for a local authority and you are looking at tenders, you're not necessarily in the best position to understand what the quality is of the services then provided, and that would apply for everything from foster care to residential care to some of these new algorithmic prediction systems that local authorities are buying in to look at the other end of the families that should go into the system. But I think the profit layer is extremely worrying.
Yeah. Would everybody be in agreement on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, when you dig into the figures, it looks like the cost per child is not that dissimilar in a private placement to a local authority placement once you put in all the overheads. But the quality and the amount fed out into the profits and interest on borrowing against the company and all of an agency work and all of the things that are different in how they staff it are are affecting the difference in the quality of delivery, but also in the supports available for the workforce. And what we want is a workforce that are psychologically available to these children and stick with these children over a long period of time. And if you pay minimum wage and you don't train and support those staff and you don't provide sick pay or the terms and conditions that public sector organisations used to, your workforce are more depleted and they turn over faster and they're less qualified and they do a less good job of that important primary care relationship with that child.
Okay, I mean, despite what you've just all said and agreed, unfortunately, more and more local authorities are ever more reliant on the private and third sector for providing services for looked after children. So, how do you think that's affected the funding and the provision of care?
It's made it less good because of the reasons we talked about already. There's less oversight of what's happening in terms of children, and we lose that relationship with the children because they're being passed around a marketplace. I'm not opposed to outsourcing, full stop. I used to work with Bernardo's. You'll be seeing, meeting with colleagues from Bernardo's in a moment. And I used to, when I was working as a senior middle manager in Bernardo's, negotiate with local authorities the provision of family centres, for example. So I see there is a space for specialist providers to come in with particular expertise and to work beside local authorities in partnership within their local areas.
Okay.
What I don't see is an advantage in that generating a profit which is actually taken out of the services, and with a motivation of the people in terms of providing that services to keep the costs as low as they can, to generate as much of a profit as they can, which is the process that we've got. So I think it's a difference between having partnerships with not-for-profit organisations and buying services from private organisations who are trying to keep their costs low so that they can generate a bigger profit.
Indeed, I note from your submission, Professor Jones, that you noted that the process of privatisation is also leading to fragmentation, unnecessary complexity, and uncertain and confused accountability.
Yep.
But Mr. Harding, if I can come to yourself, you noted that independent foster agencies are charging on average 2/3 more than the local authority foster carers. But to what extent do you think that's because they're looking after more complex cases in terms of children's, with more complex needs, or is that profiteering?
Yes, so coming back to another element of Bernardo's, so Martin Neary did a review of foster care, and indeed you've got a table on page 19 of the submission which compares on a comparable basis, so they're trying to extract, if you like, complexity. I mean, I think the key issue here, so the difference is around £300 a week, which is significant. For me, I think the significant comes in actually is what is the local authority doing to recruit more foster carers itself, and there may be a case for it paying more in terms of allowances, because you'll see there's a difference in terms of the allowances that are paid between the IFA and the LA, because clearly if someone can go to an IFA and get a higher allowance, perhaps more support, then they'll tend to do so. I mean, I think there's still nationally a big issue around recruitment of foster carers, and I think in someone's submission I read, they were sort of saying, we need more national promotion of the benefits of foster care. But I think the key thing is trying to support the recruitment of more carers that the local authority, if you like, oversees.